Good Friday morning, Mount Olive friends and family, and those of you who have tuned in, maybe for the first time, we welcome you. We have been going over this week a devotion that Brother Andrew Short had brought to us, and I'm glad that the Lord put it on his heart to do this one. Is how to love people that you disagree with. So let me share my screen with you. My computer's a little slow today. Sorry. So this was our graphic for this week. My way, your way. I guess is very appropriate when you trying to love people that you disagree with, because there's a lot of my ways and your ways when that happens. This is taken from the YouVersion devotion, How to Love People You Disagree With. And we have talked to Brother TJ and Brother Jody, Brother Jason about parts of it. I'm looking at the Hebrews verses 12. It was actually verse 14 in your devotion, but I went back and picked up a couple of verses out of Hebrews 12, and so I hope that you can follow along with me, and we'll show you what the Lord gave me when I went over this. So in Hebrews 12, verses 12 and 14, it says, "Wherefore, lift up thy hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed." And verse 14 says, "Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord." So that's verses that we're going to go with here. So in verse 12, he says, "Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees." Now, the writer of Hebrews, and some say it's Paul, and there's other thoughts on that too, but he's remembering a verse that's in Isaiah. It's in Isaiah chapter 35. And that verse says, "Strengthen ye the weak hands, and confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, Be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you." So the people of Israel had went through a very hard time. It was a bad time, but Isaiah was trying to encourage them to hang on and be strong in the Lord, for there was a brighter day coming, and not just for themselves, but to encourage the weaker brother or sister, for them to be strong in the Lord also, that God would come and save. I'm sad to say that up to this point, when all this pandemic is said and done and over with, that we as Christians and we as the church cooperative have done a bad job of strengthening the weak hands and feeble knees of ourselves, and a worse job of reminding our brothers or sisters to be strong as well. I feel like, and this is my opinion, that we have failed at being a watchman, as Ezekiel tells us in the book of Ezekiel. God says that he made us a watchman on the wall, that we were to fill in the gap, and for our families and our friends, our coworkers, and the world in general. And maybe that's why the Lord put this devotion on Brother Andrew's heart for us to do this week. It's my way, your way. But one thing we forgot about God's way. And how do we love people you disagree with when we don't even like each other? I think the devil's laughing and having a good old time watching not just the world go at each other, but Christians joining in the fray, and sometimes even egging it on. I say again, and this is my conviction, and I'm not a fan or a follower of social media, that social media is of the devil. And I know some of you may disagree with me on that, and that's all right too. You have your convictions, and I have mine also. But from what I've seen of social media, that it's hurtful, it's spiteful, it's demeaning, and it's getting worse. People will say things on social media that they would never say to someone's face. And the problem is we've taken one of the greatest tools that could ever be used for personal evangelism, and we've turned it into a hate platform. Now, if your church or group or organization or you personally are using it to reach the lost, then God bless you, and keep up the good work for that. So let's look at Hebrews 12:12. Wherefore lift up thy hands which hang down, and the feeble knees. Remember, in my previous devotions, I mentioned that about the words therefore and wherefore in the Bible, that anytime that you saw these words, you should ask, why are they there? And what is God going to tell me in the next verse or verses that follow? Wherefore, now in this case, it's a conclusional beginning. A conclusional beginning. That sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? It's a conclusion and a beginning. But it's taking us from one conclusion matter to the beginning of an action by the reader, or what is our responsibility that we're supposed to do. The writer of Hebrews, he had just made the case of chastising by God on those who are saved. This chastening by God is a result of our own doing, and God uses it to correct us and show us the right way to go and the right things to do. And so in the end, we may not like it while we're going through it, but in the end, it brings a joyful ending. So lift up holy hands that once hung low because they couldn't be lifted in praise. And feeble knees that couldn't stand in worship, but can now. And not just our hands and knees, but also those of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who have went through or who are going through the same faults and failures that we went through before we were brought back by the chastisement of God. I found this quote by John MacArthur. I like a lot of his stuff too. And he says this, he says, we are not told to strengthen our hands or our weak and feeble knees, but the hands and the knees, regardless of those of whose they are. In other words, we're not to concentrate on our weaknesses, but to help strengthen other Christians in theirs. One of the surest ways to be encouraged is to give encouragement to someone else, encouraging one another, and all the more as we see the day drawing near. And that's taken from Hebrews 10:25. He said, one of the best ways to keep continuing is to encourage others to continue. So I'm going to read that one again. I'm going to do a TJ on you. I'm going to read that one again. It says, one of the surest ways to be encouraged ourselves is to give encouragement to others. And one of the best ways to keep continuing is to encourage others to continue. So MacArthur, he's basically saying, be Jesus. Be Jesus to someone else, whether it's in your church, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your own family, whether it's in your school, whether it's in your or whether it's your teammates, whether it's your world. Be Jesus to the people you come in contact with. Hebrews 12:13 says, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, and let it rather be healed. Now, the writer, again, he's making a reference to some Old Testament verses. These are in Proverbs. And I've got those. This is Proverbs 4:25 through 27. It says, let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. So, that's pretty good information right there. That let your eyes look on, and let your eyelids look straight before thee. We close our eyes, we can't see where we're going, can we? So in verse 26, he said, ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. 27, turn not to the right hand nor to the left. remove thy foot from evil. So let's take a little closer look at verse 13 here. So what we see is that he says, and make straight paths for your feet. And, I thought about going back and getting one of the children's church videos of Andrew and Sean running in slow motion in a race. But I thought, well, this is supposed to be about loving those we disagree with. So I wouldn't put those that I do disagree with through that. I'm kidding. No, I'm not. The writer of Hebrews is telling us to stay focused on the Lord in our daily walk. We are to make being a verb, an action word, make straight. And in this context, he's saying this is an ongoing process. This is not a one and done thing. It's been said that living for Christ is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we need to treat it as such. And as I was doing this study and thinking about this, I thought of Brother Austin Ury, a very fine young man. Appreciate him and what he stands for. Austin, he's a long distance runner, and he runs all the time. He runs in the sun, he runs in the rain, he runs in the snow, he runs in the hot, and he runs in the cold. He just runs. He runs all the time. And I've noticed something. He runs in a straight path. He's not on this side of the road and then on the other side, on that side of the road, unless he's in some of this crazy traffic on Lake Street that you have to go through. He's running, and his focus is on his finish line, even though he maybe can't even see it from any certain point of his run. So make your path straight and run it as such. Don't cross over into another lane or path. It may take you the wrong way. So stay focused on your finish line, even though you can't see it right now. Because you know why? Because that's where Christ is, and he's waiting with open arms. Lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. So the writer here is referring to that which is lame here in the spiritual sense. It's not a physical element. Lame refers to the weak believers who can be easily tripped up or misled, and that's especially in a pandemic. So I guess a question we all need to ask ourselves, and I'm going to ask you, is who's watching you run your race? And are your paths straight? Brother Jason taught Wednesday night, and he mentioned how easy it is to get caught up in the grumbling and complaining and basically become a part of the problem instead of a part of the solution. People are watching how we react to everything that's going on, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's politics or whether it's wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask or governor's orders or whatever. But is the lost seeing Jesus in our responses? WWJD, we've all heard that. That used to be, what would Jesus do? Now I believe that WWJD would be, what wouldn't Jesus do? I know he wouldn't act the way some of us have who are Christians right now in this day and time that we're going through. What wouldn't Jesus do? He would not act the way that some of us have. People are watching how we react to everything that's going on, whether it's, like I said, it's the pandemic or wearing a mask or not wearing it, governor's orders, whatever. It's, it is the law seeing Jesus in our lives. That's I won't just repeat that for you. Are the laws seeing Jesus in our responses and how we act? And that's really a sad statement in this day and time that we live in. And here's why that people are watching and how we should be careful what we say or do. Romans 14:12 and 13 says, "So then every one of us shall give account of himself to God. Let us therefore judge one. Let us not therefore," start over again, John, verse 13. "Let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way." Now getting back to Austin and his running, when he's in a long distance race, and if at the start line, all the long distance runners are in one big wad of bodies because they've decided that they want to run the far right line, then there's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving and stumbling and falling, and no one is going anywhere. Or if they all choose to run helter skelter all over the place, there's going to be a lot of tripping and stumbling and falling. That's the reason they all try to run in a straight line, so they won't trip over each other. There's another quote that I have here from John MacArthur, and it says, sadly, Christians sometimes are the greatest stumbling block to Christianity. A bad example by a true believer can tilt a person away from full commitment to Christ and therefore from salvation. A poor testimony can cause irreparable harm, many times without our knowing it. It can cause an already limping unbeliever to be put out of joint, completely dislocated spiritually. Our Christian walk is being observed every day by those around us. So are we stepping stones or are we stumbling blocks? And the ones that we have disagreed with are especially looking. And maybe they're looking to see if we will fall. But that's on them. According to verse 12 here, it says, every man will give account of his own self. So let's leave the judging up to God. So, when I look at this and I think about, what John MacArthur said, we who are now saved, we owe a great gratitude to the ones who had such an impact on our lives that we are now saved and who made the way straight for us. There's a term today, it's called to pay it forward. And, we who are saved need to remember to do this. When we were lost and without Christ, someone was being an example for us and praying for us, and we ought to do the same for our lost today. Pay the love of Christ forward and be an example of a stepping stone. Let's leave a good path, for the next generation. Verse 14 says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Now, here's you a Greek word that is dioko, follow, which means to follow is dioko. That's a Greek word. It means to continue to pursue, to run swiftly in order to catch something. So when we look at this verse, it says, follow peace with all men. So we, notice, that the verse is saying, continue to pursue peace with all men and continue to pursue holiness in the next part there. And, this is not an optional activity. It's a necessary one. Now, I can see this as two separate necessary activities, but I can also see them going hand in hand. So as what I'm saying is, as I'm continuing to pursue peace, as I'm continuing to pursue peace with all men, I'm actually pursuing holiness. And on the flip side, if I am continuing to pursue holiness, then I am actually pursuing peace with all men. Because if I want to be holy, I want to have peace with all men. If that's all possible. Charles Spurgeon, another one that I think a lot of and read a lot of his stuff, is this: peace is to be studied, but not such a peace as would lead us to violate holiness by conforming to the ways of the unregenerate and impure men. We are only so far to yield for peace sake, as never to yield a principle. We are to be peaceful so far as never to be at peace with sin, peaceful with men, but contending earnestly against evil principles. We can try our best to be at peace with people, but we can only go so far. We cannot accept some of the ways that, the world has said it's okay to be. If we are saved and we are separated from the world, there are certain things that we can't do. We can't believe as the world believes and accept the things that the world accepts. So, we have to contend earnestly against evil principles, as Charles Spurgeon says. Disunity it's serious. It's serious from God's point of view, but God does not expect a believer to settle for peace at just any cost. So if we look at Romans 12:18 says, if it be possible, now Paul's writing to the Romans, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. The sad part is sometimes it's not always possible to obtain peace with some people, no matter what you try to do. You can try, but sometimes it's just not going to happen. As Charles Spurgeon said in his quote, we are not to pursue peace at the cost of truth or holiness. The Christian part in this is that we are to seek or pursue peace with eagerness, which is to say, we are to make every effort to achieve peace with others. And I took this little part out to follow holiness. So we are to follow or pursue holiness. So how do we do that? How do we pursue holiness? Well, I found 3 verses here in Romans chapter 6 that I'll go over with you. Chapter 6, verse 18 and 19 and 20 says, 18 says, being made free from sin, you became the servants of righteousness. I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh. For as ye have yielded your members servants to uncleanness and to iniquity unto iniquity, even so now yield your members servants to righteousness unto holiness. Verse 22 says, but now being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness and the end everlasting life. We pursue holiness when we seek God and his righteousness. We can never be as holy as God, which it's not going to happen. But we should always strive to be as holy as possible. And this is what we call sanctification. It's growing in the knowledge and grace of God. And when we do this, others will see the love of God in us. So when they see the change in us and they see us growing closer to God, that light that we have will draw them to us. It will draw them to the love of God that's in us and ultimately draw them to the love of God. Romans 12:1 and 2 says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Paul is saying to the Romans here, I beseech you, I implore you, I plead with you to do those things that will make you as holy as you can be, and thus you'll be accepted by God. And what I'm asking you to do is not out of your reach, and it's not asking you too much because it's your reasonable service, especially after what Christ did for us on the cross. We need to, he paid the ultimate price. And, we really, it's not beyond our reasonable service to seek holiness. And verse 2 says, and be not conformed to the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So be set apart. Don't be a follower of this world, but be a follower of God. And as we seek God and read his word and listen to his ministers and pray, we will grow in our knowledge of God, and we'll be able to know and show the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Hebrews 12:14, the last part B says, without which no man shall see the Lord. That's a stern warning, isn't it? If we don't pursue peace and we don't pursue holiness, then we will never see God because he's a holy God. Now, this is not saying that we can work our way into heaven. In no way is it saying that, because it's not based on works alone. The death of God's Son, Jesus Christ, is where our holiness comes from. We cannot gain holiness on our own, but after we receive Christ, as our Savior, holiness was given to us by God. Our part in this is to preserve this holiness. So that while we are on our journey, others will see God in us, and we will see God one day for ourselves. You know, that's all I have for you this Friday. I hope you got something out of it. It's, pursue peace, pursue holiness most of all. That's what we need to do, because if we're pursuing holiness, we'll try to be perfect people. And we're not going to be perfect. We are going to fail. God knows that. But let's strive to be as holy as we can. And thank God for the gift of his son, Jesus Christ, what he did on the cross for us, and for allowing us to be a part of that heirship that we have, that one day that we will be joint heirs with Jesus Christ of all the riches of God in heaven. So I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, once again, I think tomorrow is Brother Brett, and so you be much in prayer for him as he prepares his devotion. Be much in prayer for our church service. Brother TJ is going to be preaching on Heaven is Lit. So that's a new term that a lot of the college kids that we have coming have made him a little bit younger, made us all a little bit younger. So we appreciate them for that also. So if you don't have any place to go, you're invited to come to our church and listen to Brother TJ. So I appreciate each one of you. I hope you have a great day today and the rest of the week. Thank you all.